We're live?
You're live.
All right, man. This is going to be our. We'll give it one more spin. Right, Jimmy?
Yes.
Why the heck not? And we were talking about. You were talking about names, which is the Japanese written script.
How many people are in there? People showing up?
Yep. Yeah, so it's not unlisted. If that was your concern.
That is my concern.
Yeah.
All right.
Unless they were just. Well, no. Hey guys, were you able to get to this chat room from the main page?
A little blurry.
Yeah, but if it's blurry, it's probably on your end. You could change that in the bottom right corner and choose a different
Yeah, it looks
resolution.
Like people are filling in, so.
Yeah. So let me speak a little bit about the names, the written script, which is like one of the most important parts of the weekly magazines, because I didn't quite explain everything I saw like at the offices of Shueisha and Kodansha.
Yes, yeah.
So I was talking about like these partitioned off areas where the editor meets like rookie cartoonists and stuff. That area is also where the editor will have some conversation with the mangaka, sometimes about the names, if it's not at their studio or if it's in-house. And very often what will happen, just so that they maximize time usage, is the mangaka will sit there at that table and like redraw the name like after the conversation. Like they'll just sit there in the offices of Kodansha and just redraw the written script so that they could just get the quick approval,
Yes.
run home, and put on some black tea and stay up for 3 days to like draw the thing.
Wow, it's so intense. That's what the reason I asked about it, Ed, is we've looked at that Masters of Manga
Yes.
book, which has interviews with different manga artists talking very processed nuts and bolts.
Yeah.
And that seems to be the writing format.
Yeah.
Those names. And I always wonder, like, for my own use, like, it kind of makes sense, right?
Words and
like,
pictures.
Exactly. So I've just, one of the things I read this week was an interview with Chris Ware by Dylan Williams from after the first issue of Acme Novelty Library was published. So
Wow.
early in Chris Ware's, early in the game. And they talk about layouts. And Chris Ware at that time did not do any layouts. It would just be right on the page. But he was always one of those cartoonists that I would think of as like writing and drawing simultaneous. Like it's the same act. And it makes so much sense to me to think that way, but it's not how I work. Like I just really have to I use the writing as a planning stage.
Yeah.
But the names seem like almost a hybrid between the two, where, like they're so rough, it's kind of like, it is part writing and part art. Like it makes more sense than like I'm going right to the board, Chris Ware style, and doing this super dense thing, and it'll work because I don't know. At this point, he's been doing it for 35 years. But for somebody starting out or trying, like I think about working that way, the name seems like a possibility of like, okay, that makes sense. I could see how that would work. I'm glad you got to see some of that stuff because. I mean, even original manga art is one of those things you don't see that much of. So
There's stories about that. The mangaka, they hang on to their pages. There's that one Jump manga that hit 200 volumes, and a tankobon is like at least 190 pages. So 190 times 200.
man, I can't even do math like that.
And when I was at Shueisha, which is the Shonen Jump publisher, Mr. Nakano, the editor-in-chief, said that the more successful mangaka and the people who've had like the longer running series, they have different houses, like for temperature controlled, like homes,
Right.
to store the artwork, and many of the mangaka like have that.
I know collectors that do that. That'll have like a really nice apartment or house, and it's just storage.
Yeah.
You hear stories about Brad Pitt has like 11 houses full of art because he buys art, but it's just buildings full of art at some point.
I have a good story with the number 11 in it that has to do with Tokyo, and it has to do with the sushi dinner I got with Mr. Nightowl, the creator of Trigun, and Mr. Minowa, the character designer for Ninja Scroll. Both men worked with Guillermo del Toro in various capacities on Mr. Minowa worked, I believe, on Blade, and I actually forget what Mr. Nightowl worked with him on, but they were kicking it with him when Guillermo first came to Japan. He came to Japan with 7 empty suitcases, left with 11 full ones.
That's a great story.
Yes.
That's amazing.
Yes. And it was, I forget when I saw it, maybe last year sometime, but Guillermo was flexing and he was showing off, like, he has a little cottage behind his house that is his, like, manga cottage. And you can see all the books he's got, dude. Like, you could see the contents of those 11 suitcases on that very viral tweet. I believe they said with great heartache, and this sucks for sure if it's true, but they said that maybe that got caught up in those California wildfires. Yeah,
that's painful.
Yeah, so the manga library
I've known people that have had their collections burn, and it's like, I remember one telling me the fireman reported it as, it was like on the 2nd floor. The fire hit an accelerant, is the way the fireman described it.
Right.
That's tragic. There's the story of Wally Wood's original art that the place it was at burnt.
Yeah.
And it was in like a metal filing cabinet, and the heat like fused the filing cabinet shut or whatever and protected the work. I think I believe that's some of the artwork that's in the Wally Wood Artist Edition. Survived that kind of a fire, you know, kind of just by luck.
So this fire safes ain't bullshit then.
There you go. Might be the next investment.
Yeah. Like, yeah.
There was Eric Larson posted a picture not too long ago of like his Savage Dragon art, and I don't know if he sold any of that, but he's definitely kept most of it, if not all of it. And it was on like big metal shelves.
It's like these.
Yeah,
it's like these things.
It's like these, but yeah, these are on camera. And it, you know, just stacks of it, just big piles of artwork, and it's amazing to see. And I mean, like, you know, 200 Tankoben, 40,000 pages there or something, you know, so it's more than Savage Dragon. It's hard to really imagine what 40,000 pages look like.
But they do not sell it. There's a perceived thing that there is no market for it in Japan, and I'm like, you guys are sorely mistaken. And in fact,
I've heard multiple things about why they don't sell it.
I want to have this conversation, but I just know there's going to be some gross fuckers out there who are going to exploit this. But there was a guy like talking like about starting to maybe bring some stuff to Angoulême and act as like a broker or something, and they were talking about like when Tatsumi was sick, like he sold a bunch of stuff for something like $500 US, like the original pages, and like a gang of them.
Yeah.
And he's like, and now a page will go for like $3,000 US, and I'm like, you shouldn't be the broker. Like, it'll go for far more than that. You know what I mean? Like, maybe you don't be the guy.
So
like you do a little research, man, because
I think that a lot about all of the manga that I've been exposed to in Japan is, like, price-wise, it's so different than here. You know, like you talk about, what's the store where all the manga's $1?
Yeah, Book Off.
Book Off. Like, you know, you see these volumes lined up here, people watching this, and it's like, these books, like when I went, they'd be anywhere from $1 to like $3. Like, I don't know if I paid more than $3 for anything that I bought there, book-wise, which is incredible. You know, it'd be $20 here.
Right.
And it's like, shouldn't we all be trading these somehow? Like, I see people, I met a guy from London who was here bin diving, and he's like, we just don't have anything like this really in London. And he's buying, you know, 2 suitcases full of stuff that he's going to send back. And it's like, we need to figure out like how we can circulate all this stuff from the US to Japan and back and to London, you know, wherever these comics interests are. We need to have a better system of like, how do we, because it's affordable locally.
Yeah.
So like, how can we, you know, facilitate being able to access this stuff, because it's wondrous.
I took a list from each of my hosts from Japan.
Nice.
And the stuff that they're looking for is easily accessible here. Things that I'm going to be able to get them very easily, very cheaply, and I may even have some that I will just like hook them up with.
Right.
And then it's like, you know, you eat it on the shipping. Vice versa. I was actually almost mad that you talked about Mandarake has the online thing, because I wanted to like do a very specific hit before we start talking that shit.
Sorry.
No, it's no problem. Because I'm not going to say what it is.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you the idea afterward, and I know you're going to be stoked on it. But I'm going to do that, and it's like, yeah, I'm going to get hit with shipping, but it just evens out.
It does even out. If the books are, $4 or something,
Yeah,
it evens out.
it evens out. Yeah,
And then volume is the thing too. Like if you're shipping your buddies some stuff, you ship 50 books at a time or something that kind of offsets the per unit cost of the shipping.
yeah.
Yeah, I guess there are ways around it, but it does surprise me that there's not someone who has set up that business that you're describing, because it's just like, man, this stuff is amazing. I don't know where you find it here. Maybe some of the bigger cities have some of these places, but I wish I had access to it more frequently. I would drive to a shop to look through this stuff.
Oh, dude. Dude.
Just can't drive to Japan.
Yeah. Like, fuck, man. Like it was heaven, man. Like there's this town called, it's actually where Shueisha is, and the other big publisher is called Shogakin. I'm saying it a little, Shogakin or something like that.
That sounds right.
And that's the morning publisher, like that Doraemon, that cat thing that is popular everywhere in the world except America. That's sort of like where that thing was published. They're within walking distance, a block and a half from one another. And I think by virtue of that, there is a whole strip of of vintage bookstores that have so many old comics. I'm talking $1 issues of Garo from the 60s with Kamui on the cover. And let me explain some of my reasoning for what we have here. You'll notice many, many, many small books. And that's for a reason, because the bigger stuff takes up volume in your very limited space. So I just didn't buy too much big stuff. And Garo's it's almost like regular comic book size.
Yeah.
Another crazy thing that happened about 2 weeks in, I went to like a US comic shop after being out there for 2 weeks, hunting comics, these things that are about this size and stuff. And when I went to the American comic shop, only being removed from this collection for 2 weeks, the new week's worth of books, and the new comics get out there on a Friday. So if they come out Wednesday here, Friday there. Very interesting. But they all looked like treasury editions to me. Like they all read in my mind as being extra gigantic, because I've been dealing in so many like very tiny digest size books.
That's interesting. I guess you just get used to, whatever you get used to, it's all relative.
Yeah, and your brain like has no problem just like making like weird readjustments and stuff, man.
It is cool to see the different formats. I was curious, Ed, you've been to Europe several times.
Yeah.
Everybody I know, cartoonist-wise or comics fan that goes to Europe, comes back with stories about that comic scene and how different comics are treated in Europe, and festivals are different and everything. And we've experienced some of that. That's another one of those formats. Like if you look at these popular manga formats, the Tankoben, totally different than like a European album.
Yeah.
And totally different industry.
Right.
But equally, like, both of those communities of comics or industries are sort of like equally different from like the US comics industry.
Right.
Do you take stuff away from that at all? Like, you visit these publishers and you kind of see a different model. Like in your mind, is it like, oh, we should be doing this here, or I should be doing this and sending it there? Or, how do we make comics respected or for everybody, or, whatever you see in these other places?
I'm going to put it this way now that we're like on the spot. We're going to have some conversations. We're going to have some things to talk about. But this format is a consensus agreement of 40 years of trial and error. I saw the original Lone Wolf and Cub.
Yeah.
It's bigger.
Interesting.
The small size, I'm gonna get a little bit wrong, so somebody in the comments will fix it. That's called bunko format.
Okay.
And that comes later. Now, they tried bunko format in several different ways. They tried it with like, original tankobon comes out and it becomes a giant hit. Then they make the smaller, more manageable bunko version.
I saw books like that.
They tried it the opposite, where they put the new one out as bunko, because the idea is that far more you can put in your pocket on the train. But that is being like sloughed off. Like they decide no, like this is the consensus agreement of many years, and kind of like mirroring America. The Tonkobon is it's from like the 70s, maybe the very late 60s, but the 70s is like when they started that stuff. And before that, there was rental manga, and when you went to Nakano Broadway and you on the outside of the stores, like when you're looking in at the in the glass windows of the very expensive books of like the Tezuka, that's what you're looking at. You're looking at the stuff that was like rental manga, and
That's interesting. I've heard of that.
right. And so like in the 50s and shit, like, you know, paper was more scarce post-war, all of that, and you could pay some money, go to a joint, read that, and there are still
Almost a library or video store. Or
yeah, and I'm assuming that rental means you could take it home, but to this day there are manga cafes and shit where you can literally pay money to be there overnight with a room full of manga.
That's fun.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. I've heard of those too. Man, it's interesting to think that way. The other thing that stood out to me whenever you were visiting, I think it was the Weekly Shonen Jump offices, and talking about the survey card. And in my head, it was like, and for people that haven't seen that episode yet, basically each weekly Shonen Jump would come with a card that would, I don't know if it was loose leaf or bound in, and the readers would fill out what they liked or what they didn't like and send it in. And potentially 2 million plus, you know, circulation of these. I'm sure everybody isn't filling them in, but I mean, even if a small percentage is, you're talking tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of responses, in an effort for the editorial to know like what's hitting, what's not, and really staying up on that. And that's incredible to me. That sounds like a very hungry business, like somebody that's, it reminds me of like, I was hearing that and thinking, what do the upstarts do? Like the people that are really hungry and gunning for the top position, like wonder what kind of data they're out there searching for and how they're trying to like be more aggressive in delivering the comics that people want. But it's just so, I hate to use the word aggressive, but I mean, that's a company that's very interested in providing what their readers want.
And they've created a hit factory. I mean, the successful Shueisha books, the successful Shueisha properties, you can't escape them in all of Tokyo. Like if you even hate comics, you still got to drink milk or something. You know what I mean? And there might be a little doodle from One Piece is on that. And that's a decision that's made.
Wild.
So when I showed you the outside of Shueisha, like in our Instagram photos up on the Cartoonist Kayfabe Instagram, floor number 4 is the editorial office for Weekly Shonen Jump. There are other manga, and they'll have that's the biggest, but there are other offices, but some of those floors are just licensing floors. Like people doing business on the phone constantly.
That makes sense, and I mean it's a microcosm of what we saw at Cartoon Books, you know, where you have the much smaller couple people, but it's still like there's one person that's the task, is like managing that licensing side of it.
Yeah, and imagine if you have one company that has JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, One Piece, Naruto, Dragon Ball, yeah, and just the stuff just keeps, the merch just keeps rolling. You know what I'm saying, man? There's properties that are decades old.
That popped up to me too, like just the manpower involved in doing this weekly, like just paste ups or InDesign or whatever, just literally the mechanical part of putting this together every week. Like, wow,
we had some talks.
That is a team.
We had some talks, man. So modern days, nowadays, 6-color cover, like 6 colors. So I was asking, well, I know CMYK. What's the other stuff? Like, what are the other 2 colors?
Yeah, you got me on the edge of my seat.
So one is a very specific Pantone pink for flesh.
Okay.
And it's like they want this specific flesh tone to like always come across. And the other,
not 25% cyan and 25%
I told them
yellow?
that. I told them that from the Klaus commercial.
Magenta and yellow?
Yep, there is no blue. That's the Dan Klaus Apple commercial. Yes. The other color is reserved for potpourri of fluorescent ink. Like you get one cool fluorescent
That's cool.
a week.
That's neat.
Yeah.
I hadn't heard that. That's really interesting.
And I got to check out like the proofs, and then you see like the little Pantone, you see the numbers of like, okay, yeah, like it made sense after I saw that, and I saw more than CMYK, but then I saw some of the original stuff like the Naruto people, what they're working on. They also put together like the cover for whatever issue it's going to be, and what's in production now will see the light of day in 2 weeks.
That's the other question I had for you, was like, how fast does this stuff get turned around?
Yeah.
That's another piece, you know, like when you think of our system of like the direct market, where it's like, man, it's really funny when you think of our system, because you have the direct market, which would be maybe 4 months ahead, like say an image book, which is pretty quick. You know, I mean, maybe it's 4, 5, 6 months where you're pre-ordering, and then several months before you even print the books. But then if it's like the book market, it's even bigger, right? It might be a year or more. You finish the production, and then it's like, okay, now we're gonna sell it, go through editorial, production, figure out all of this stuff, scheduling. Man, 2 weeks. You know, you can respond to those cards pretty fast in 2 weeks. You know, something could come and go, and before the American comic book would cycle through one issue, a series could come and go. You know, like, well, they don't like it, you're out. You've done 3 chapters and moving on.
And there's a way to tell too when you look in the table of contents. It's the stuff toward the end that's the least popular, and so like Mr. Nakano was like, One Piece will never be down here. but when I saw the color work, and it is just it's Copic markers on regular paper with some color pencil on top, and it's just like a very beautiful like little marker drawing, you know, like that translates pretty well when it's scanned in and everything, man. A couple other things that I don't know that I was 100% clear on, so I want to like just say it, and like if you have questions, like I'll be able to try to clarify. So when you crack this Shonen Jump issue open, you will see many different fonts across all the manga, and it is the editor who chooses that. The editor is an assistant of a fashion. They're a very substantive portion of the process, because they will have a discussion with you. Jim, let's talk about what's going to happen in a new Street Angel, and they're going to have ideas, and depending on where you are in the, you know, senpai, kohai, like where are you in the hierarchy and popularity, all that, that'll dictate how much sway you have yourself.
Right.
When you get involved in these things, it's a collaboration.
Yeah.
Even though it's like your property, all that. So they will contribute a lot, and it is the editor who chooses the stuff, because they do understand that you are drawing. This was the same at Kodansha and Shueisha. An editor will have maybe 2 series guys that they are responsible for, and maybe almost 10 like one-shot rookies. And they call them rookies, which I think is so cool. Like, it's like baseball, you know? Right? Like it's like it's like the AAA players. So they'll have like 3 or 4, like they'll have almost 10 rookies, and then 2 big stars or series, and the editor has to be available for a lot of help, and a lot of what they'll do is research. One of my questions was, how the fuck does a cartoonist learn anything to go from one series to another? Like let's say Monster, where it's like now you're dealing with a doctor character, you got to know medical stuff, and then you came from the book Happy, which is like a tennis star, and then before that it's like a judo lady who does tournaments and stuff. Where do you find the time to develop an education in these different things? This is where the editor comes in a lot of ways, man. So for an example, Akira will say, maybe Otomo would, as he's frantically trying to like create his names for this episode, maybe he'll hit up the editor and say, Akira needs to be held in like a cryogenic, like cold storage what is the coldest temperature known to man? How do we achieve that? Blah, blah, blah. Then they have to go through, the editor goes through encyclopedias and stuff, and will spend a portion of their day and be like, it's called absolute zero, we can't humanly, achieve that, but it exists in concept, and blah, 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 and reports that back. So they're important in that way too, man. And the editors were very proud of like that, of doing that kind of go-getter, that gopher work at Kodansha. The one lady I took a pic with that had the overalls, her name's Chika Ichimura. She like she'll hop on a train and go off to some like weird outskirt of Tokyo to like take some photos for dudes and like come back and like, here, man.
You know what? There's a guy at Marvel that does this, that was doing footnotes for Grand Designs.
Oh, yeah.
Because we were looking at Tom's Grand Design and sort of being like, the footnoting is so extensive, and you guys didn't do that.
Right.
Somebody did that, somebody on staff. A little bit different, but still, like somebody was going through hundreds of issues of Fantastic Four or X-Men and being like, this is when Galactus turned out the lights.
Yeah, the difference is, those motherfuckers ain't help us.
It's
true.
True.
That's some afterthought stuff, man.
That's really interesting. It's like I was thinking just of like the running comic that I was putting together, and like doing research on that. I did it myself, but it's the same process of like, well, how long are meets, and what is the average time for a high school team or whatever. Like all of that stuff, like you do have to kind of like go dig that up, and it's so taken for granted, but like still you got to do it.
Yeah.
And then it becomes inexplicable whenever movies get stuff way wrong. Like Ghost Rider, whenever they're jumping goalpost to goalpost and saying it's 100 yards and it's like it's 120 yards. Like, don't you guys have that person? Like, you're probably spending more than a chapter of any manga creation, and yet they have that person running down the facts.
Yeah, I remember Neil deGrasse Tyson's always proud to talk about the star alignment in Titanic was incorrect for that night, and he was vocal about that, and in like a special edition, like the new edition, like the stars have been rearranged in the sky to be accurate.
Give him a little kickback for that.
Let me go back down on the track with the lettering, because I found this to be super fascinating. So you'll crack that open, you'll see many different fonts, you'll see many different sizes, and this is all denoted like when the art is turned in, there is about 3 passes between printer and editor. So you have to allow time for that.
Yeah.
And the editor is choosing the font. And at Shueisha, there is a hardback book that's about yay thick, but very small print of maybe 50 fonts a page. Thousands of fonts in this book, perhaps.
Man, that's a thing to pocket. I would have loved to have seen that.
Oh, I know, man. At Kodansha, I was at both of the places one day after the other, dude. Can you fucking believe that shit? At Kodansha, they have one big, like 11 by 17 sheet, small print, with all the fonts on the front and back of that. These are the fonts that we use. And I kind of think of it as, like, let's think of the color palette of the first 100 years of comics, 64 colors between all the percentages of CMYK. But maybe 40 of those are diarrhea green or brown. You don't use those. And I think that's what the Shueisha book is. Like maybe a lot of trash fonts that just will never be used.
Could be.
So these are, the Kodansha thing is more stream. Like these are like the important 100 fonts. Now there's another piece of the puzzle, and you read down, and the characters are thick. Each katakana or kanji or whatever is like a lot of like strokes. Mm-hmm. So you think of its unit of dimension to be a square. Now there is this acetate sheet full of squares of like, say it's 11 by 17 too. And then there'll be like a set of squares, and they have like, say, a few millimeters apart space for each of the, what we would call point sizes for the fonts. Now the editor has to like lay that on the art boards and decide how big those characters need to be. So we need to find out what the words are, and that's usually penciled in. It's penciled on all the original art. And now you have to imagine with this font you're going to use how big, and accounting for dot gain on the shitty like toilet paper that those magazines are printed on, is it going to be clear? Is it not? So you got to also use this cellophane or this acetate to like choose the size font for every panel, every page, man. And it's all different. Like you'll see in there, man, like sometimes there'll be some exclamatory statements and stuff where it's like bigger and bolder, but that decision is made. Like the Xeroxed page of an average Kodansha or Shueisha book has like John Madden football plays of red ink all over it.
Wow.
And that's just the instruction for the printer. So it's like, do the art, the editor gets it, makes Xeroxes, does the football plays, chooses fonts, and then there's also tons of just like stuff in the margins of just like weird writing and shit, like just ads, or I have no idea, you know, like it's not germane to the story, and it's not printed in the tankobon, so it's like whatever that shit is, just littered, and they choose that stuff too. So then editor does that, goes to the printer has to, you know, type all this stuff in, send that to the editor. Maybe some shit's out of order, they got to fix that up. Maybe I want this, do that one or two more times, and then it gets to
wonder how many series an editor works on, because that sounds pretty involved for an editor. Like that sounds
like I said,
close to full time.
Yeah,
or something.
like I said, they between Shodansha, Kodansha and Shueisha.
This is the jet lag.
Yeah. I'm almost in Pittsburgh for 24 hours. It's 4:35 p.m. and I landed at like 7 yesterday. The editor's responsible for 2 series, and then all the rookies. So nobody's sleeping.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
Nobody sleeps.
That's great, man. That lettering stuff's really interesting. Lettering's kind of been on my brain a lot, so it's kind of fun to hear that. My first graphic design job, we had a binder with like all the fonts that we had, and we would have them broken up. You know, like you were describing, like how maybe, you know, like a small number of these fonts are probably the ones that are used mostly.
Mm-hmm.
And so we would have all of our fonts broken up into various like visual groupings, you know, sans serif, serif, bold, display lettering, stuff like that, to kind of make it a little bit easier if you were looking for something, a headline font or something like that. But of course now, you know, everything's just digitally cataloged, and it does make me wonder like how this operation looks as it moves more digitally. As you're describing like those charts and sizing, it's like, man, at some point that becomes digital, I assume, and it'd be interesting to watch maybe on Manbend or something, to watch these guys that are maybe more on the digital spectrum and see what tools they're using, and also how that changes their workflow. Because I'm sure it's coming. I mean, I would expect them to be further ahead than us in that regard.
Yeah. Now, there are 2.2 million weekly Shonen Jump magazines that come out. There are 6 million people who read it digitally each week. And in the digital space, Endless Canvas, there's a lot more stuff on the digital. Like, I had those conversations. What do I have to do to get out here? I want to work in the place that's 5 times bigger than America. I want to work in the place where there's more, you know, more comics readers than anywhere on the globe.
Yeah.
So how do I make this happen? Send us some names. Like, the name is everything to start. They know that you could draw, but like, let's make a story that appeals to the Japanese sensibility. And oh, this is so
That's
dope.
pretty interesting too. I mean, that's a big difference. When you think here, it's like, show us some sample pages of what you can draw.
Yeah.
You know, like style is such a big issue, at least historically with Marvel DC model, it was style. You know, it was like, bring that surface quality. What do you have?
Yeah. Here it's like, you could draw, like,
yeah,
now
a story.
Yeah, give us what are your ideas? Like, ideas are key. And there are those situations where they married up creative teams because like the writer would create a very compelling name, and it's like, well, this has to see the light of day. Let's go through a pile of rookies and marry you with somebody. But Mr. Nakano, I asked him, how did you, because he's young, he's just a few years older than me, I feel like. How'd you get this position? And when he hooked up with Shueisha early on, it's like you become the fucking survey filler outer. Let's see where your taste levels are. Like which of these books has to go? Which of these series has
Wow.
to go? So you have to
That's
like,
pretty good.
yeah. So you have to
That
like
makes so much
see a
sense.
bunch of stuff, and maybe even see like some actual like one shots and the art. What's shown in Jump quality?
Yeah.
Go ahead, choose, man. You have 5 minutes, and it was like a series of that stuff that he did to like,
That's a good question you asked. That's fun to hear.
yeah,
Wow, that sounds like the right system.
it does, yeah, yeah, and like if now Shueisha, Kodansha, Shogakin, however you say that, Shogakin. This is Marvel DC. This is mainstream stuff. When you look at Jump Comics, it has like that level of polish of like intensely finished,
Consistent.
consistent, all of that. And like, the average Jump comic, it's here's your story, like here's the obstacle, overcome the obstacle, next week, bigger obstacle. Bigger, 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 always bigger. Over 9,000 Dragon Ball, it's a meme.
Yes.
But there are other places. Beam Comics. Beam Comics is like the Fantagraphics of Japan, dude. They make beautiful books. My eyes on the shelf as I was looking through books were mostly attracted to the spines of Beam Comics because of just organic artwork. You could tell that one person did the whole thing. One of my regrets was not hooking up Everett Glenn. Kayfabe man was kicking it in Pittsburgh for a hot minute. He hooked me up with Atsushi Kaneko through online, and Atsushi does this book called Bambi and Her Pink Gun.
Yeah, I know that.
Yeah.
It's been licensed here in the U.S.
2 volumes of like 6 or 8 or something, and I didn't physically connect with it. It didn't happen. But that's an example. That's published through Beam.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so you imagine that art style. It's not your like deadline of like a Jump book or something where it's like G pen, fast, whatever. It's more human. So like I connected with those guys like the second day before I left, man. So it's like Saturday we were kicking it, and that was like just an interesting experience because there is no cafes. Like I couldn't get any work done out there. It was perhaps foolish to even think that was possible because it's Tokyo. Like you're in Tokyo. What do you do? But every restaurant is like, get in, get your food, get out. There's no sitting. There's no chatting. You will get stared at. So what do you have discussion? Like, how do you talk to people? There is like a building with like rooms that you could just rent out to just like have meetings, and it has like full like kitchen area. It's like an apartment, but like a efficiency or whatever. Except done up with like dry erase boards, boardroom table, and bath, shower, all that. So we went to one of those joints, and I got to meet like the new generation of like young mangaka coming up, and most of them like through Beam. There's a woman named Mika Yamamoto, Dr. Mika Yamamoto, who she's a mangaka, but she also teaches manga at a college out there. And her book was recently translated to French, but she was talking with my man RJ Casey at Fantagraphics, man, to like have that shit. But she's like, it's been 6 months. I'm just like, I'll put an email together, man. I'll try to help accelerate things. But these kids are fucking dope. And you just don't know who it is you're hanging out with. So like this one dude named Takahito, mangaka, he just draws with chopsticks and toothpicks is how he inks. His father was a movie director, and there's like a famous like kind of cult classic flick called Happy that had a Criterion Collection release. Like his dad like directed that, and his dad directed like the Blackjack movie.
Wow.
and like had a relationship with Tezuka, and Tezuka hated the movie and stuff. And it's like and we're all just sitting there kicking it. But one of these books, one called Confused, I believe if you look at the little blue duck thing, there's a yellow spine, and I believe that might be the spine for Confused. The mangaka, very much inspired by Dan Clowes, Chris Ware, Adrian Tomine.
You know what, man? I might have picked up some of that.
Yeah?
I picked up a cartoonist there, a couple books that was by a guy inspired by those guys. So yeah, it'll be fun to get into some of these specifics and actually show some of what you're discussing. Like you showed me the chopstick, that art, and I would have never in a million years thought that's how they were drawing that. I mean, it's, whenever an industry is producing this volume of work, the range is going to be everything you could imagine, and then some, and then the guy who's thinking of like, oh, I'll try a toothpick to make this mark.
Yeah.
Like that kind of range is just, I guess it's like that idea of, in infinity, monkeys type Shakespeare or whatever,
Right.
On a wide enough scale. And in a lot of ways, that's coming from what we're used to with American comics. That's kind of what you get whenever you walk into an industry, as you say, 5 or 6 times bigger. You're going to have that 5 or 6 times greater range.
Yeah, like
in styles and content and genres and audience, everything.
you had to dig for it. You had to dig for it because
there's fringe everywhere. You know what I mean? It just, maybe the volume's bigger that you're getting to those, kind of the boundary pushing stuff, the stuff that's different, avant-garde is going to be, I think any kind of industry, and maybe a big mainstream industry like comics in Japan, it's even more of people that are pushing those boundaries, of people that are searching for the alternatives as creators or readers. But, if you have the mainstream, you're going to have that. It's an inevitability. It's physics, it's that opposite push or whatever.
The Dojinshi space out there is so huge that there are printers devoted just to that. And that's where you get your fringe stuff. And I was speaking in my Kayfabe Weekly about Comic-Ket and how it is like 3 times the amount of San Diego Comic-Con just for that like boys love type Dojinshi. Now, I formulated my question to my bros out there incorrectly, because for 3 weeks I've been getting the answers of like, yeah, no, this is like the Dojinshi. This is like basically what Dojinshi is, man. And I'm like, there's no other kind. Oh, it's rare, it's weird, blah blah blah. And then I get sushi with the Trigun dude, and I ask him like, how did you get started? Assuming that he would say Dojinshi because that's like most people, but also assuming that it would have been like Takashi Okazaki who made Afro Samurai Dojinshi. And, a cool original thing. And that's exactly what it was. He created original Dojinshi, original stories, and there is a convention for that that's dope called Komitia. And I almost was like, yo, guys, how come you guys didn't like mention it? Because I was asking, but it was just...
Imagine walking through one of those conventions. I would get like 7 tables in and just have to lay down.
Dude, my dude Tsuna is his name. He is an amazing graphic designer, incredible artist. We went to maybe 4 or 5 places where he's like, oh, I designed that. Wow. And it would be like Macross models and shit like that. And then it would be like a t-shirt, and then he's got a real good business going, man. But when it was mentioned that I should check out Comic-Ket, his English is a little lacking, and he was like, oh, like it's like hot and stinky.
Sounds like an American show.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's got a whole process like with the flow and all that shit, man. But the one that we would want to go to is Komitia. It is original Dojinshi, original ideas, and it's just self-published comics. That's what Dojinshi is. Dojinshi is vanity press. So on this table somewhere, there is a Dojinshi of Batmobiles.
Yes.
And otaku is like just crazed fan, but it doesn't have to be crazed anime fan or crazed manga fan. So there is like otaku for like locomotives, and that's like universal. There's the train guys everywhere, and you would see Dojinshi of that.
I need to think of them that way.
Right.
Because the train people I know are like old men now.
And I'm sure same with the Japanese, but I seen Dojinshi of playground monkey bars and shit like that. I've seen Dojinshi of couches. Couches. So like fabric
one
designs.
Man's Dojinshi
is another man's. Yeah.
That's. I feel overwhelmed, and I have not been in Japan for a month.
Every day was an adventure, man. Every day was an adventure. Every day, just more and more info dump, and it was like relentless. Like I still haven't even gotten to the point here where it's like I've came down. Like
Right.
I haven't had like a 8 hour sleep in a long time. You know what I'm saying? It was nuts. One at least one more thing about on Halloween, because this is like a very fun cultural thing that I made note of the night of and had it kind of explained to me without my prompting the next day. So we went out there, man, and I had my little Kaneda jacket, and my homeboy was dressed up like Tetsuo, and we're taking pics and shit. With, you know, I was choosing to take pics with clowns and like SWAT team, because I feel like Kaneda would be arrested or whatever. And you know, he was taking pics with like medical people and clowns, and we were just getting a whole bunch of that. And what you would find is that it was just pockets of this group of friends decided to be Joker. This group of friends decided to be doctors, and you could just like fuzz out your eyes and just like look at the crowd, and you just see like little pockets of white, and it's like, oh, there's a bunch of lab coats, or pockets of black, and it's like, oh, there's a bunch of SWAT team, and oh wow, there's 5 Harley Quinns right here, and I just was like, whatever. Halloween is a newish phenomenon out there. It's you know, same as it is here. It's just a money making thing. You know, sell some candy, sell some costumes and shit, and it's slowly creeping into the culture there. But it was explained to me that the typical Japanese way of being is to just not stand out. So these groups, like by virtue of putting on a costume, is standing out. So the way that you could blend in
Right.
is to just, everybody is Joaquin Phoenix fucking Joker. Like I don't know, man. Do A or nay, like next time you play video games, and it's like, okay, I guess we're all going to be Joaquin Phoenix Joker. A lot of that, man. But I just found that super fascinating, man, because it's like they wanted to like
Sure.
dress up, but
Yeah.
you can't be too flashy. But then it made me think of like, you know, the next day is kicking it with Mr. Nightowl, the Trigun dude, and I would bet you that every successful mangaka doesn't have that problem of like it. You know how people from other countries could come here and they see the system that we have set up, and they see how it's different. They have fresh eyes. They see how it's different from their situation, and we're brought up in it. And a lot of people take what we have here for granted and don't use what we have to, like, you know, start a business and attain, you know, true massive success. But people will come in and like will be able to figure that out. I think that like the successful mangaka, it's like they see what the cultural norms are, and the fact that most people like just want to kind of like blend, and it's like you don't have to. But that's the consensus idea, but you don't have to, and then you get to be a star. But you just have to go against the crew for a little bit. You have to maybe be looked at as a little bit of an asshole to start, especially if you haven't proven yourself yet. You got to take the chance,
Yeah.
and then you just got to be right, and then you get to be a big star.
Man, that's such an interesting description, Ed. It makes me think of Pipochu the manga,
Yeah,
because there's so many, like the characters in Pipochu, several of them are looking for that community, that belonging, you know, and it's like mainly the American character, the one protagonist, he just longs to find his people, his tribe. And then some of the Japanese characters are the opposite. They're struggling because they don't want to be part of that group.
yeah.
You know, they have their own desires, or they break the mold in some way that makes them feel, you know, other and alien. But it fits so in line with what you're describing there.
We got to get Felipe on the
sure.
on the show, especially with like this big info dump that I was able to just glean over the past month. The people that I connected with, Miss Sheena, she was Felipe's agent. She's the one that brokered the thing to like get me into the Kodansha offices, and the editors that I was kicking it with, the current editors of Morning Magazine, they were Felipe's editor. Like, and the current editor of Young Magazine helped Felipe get his like work visa and all of that, was able to make those moves. Some of there's some shuffling that has happened since he was over there, which is unfortunate for me because the editor dude at Young, he likes foreign cartooning, and he was like, yes, Felipe, like let's bring him in.
And we should say Felipe Smith, an American cartoonist that's done some manga and has done American comics too. Like one of the Ghost Rider revivals, he was the writer for and did some art. But...
Yeah, for sure. And you know, one of the he got a Kodansha series.
Right.
Congratulations, son.
That was licensed then for an English edition, which is Peepochu that we were talking about.
Congratulations, son. You have your series. We expect the first 17 pages next week.
Tomorrow.
You have 3 days to
He has some amazing stories of like like going there and testing for that stuff and being like, okay, back to the hotel to like do another 20 pages in the name or whatever.
I hung out with a hentai cartoonist, a guy who does porn.
Yeah.
And it just isn't looked at that way. Like it's whatever. It's not as gross or whatever as like the average person here would think of it as, man. So it's like the dude stands tall, is very proud, and is not disrespected or anything. I'll say it here, but I did not bring that home. So Aki, I'm sorry, because I just didn't. I was scared to have it in my fucking luggage.
Yeah.
I was terrified to have that in my luggage. That said, when he was kind of like getting started, he worked as an assistant on regular manga, and the test that his mangaka gave him was to take one of those 2-page spreads of the last tankobon of Akira with the buildings, and you have to trace it, and I'm gonna like time you, not sit there with the watch, but it's like, here, trace that. You get it done fast enough, you get to be my assistant.
Wow.
Yeah, but that was like his test to like become.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's tough stuff.
Right.
What
else?
I'm asking you.
There's probably so much more, but we could be done for now, man. I'm almost here for 24 hours. we're on 22 hours, man. And you know what? It feels like fucking midnight. I have to get out of this house and go running, and I have to like keep moving, man.
Yeah, it's probably going to be a little bit of a catch up on your schedule.
Yeah, like
a month is a long time. I feel like, is jet lag based on how long you're away or time zone differences?
Yeah, that's a good question, man. But I'll give you empirical data as
it took me about 2 weeks to round into form after my trip, so
yeah, we'll see, man.
be some recovery involved here.
Won't be a bad idea if I keep waking up daywalker hours, man, through us going to Kansas City next week, because we have to catch that plane at like 10 a.m. or some bullshit.
Yes.
And that is not Eddie P hours. I don't see 10 a.m., man. I'm a successful comic book creator. I can wake up when I want. And it's usually in the afternoon.
Yeah.
This is going to be my last set of travels for a while, though. The Japan thing needed to happen. I needed to get out there. I've always wanted to go. And when I go next time, it's going to be for it's at least 2 weeks. But I need to finish this next book. And talking with some of those editors out there, they want to see some names of some other shit. So I have to work on that too. So I'm back. It's the first time I took time off in 16 years of drawing.
That's a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Readjust the brain a little bit.
And take in so much information. You know, it was a exercise of absorbing information, like going to a mandarake, looking at every book, like literally just like shelf by shelf. Like, I don't know what I'm looking at, but is this cool? Is it not? Is this cool? Is it not? And then walking more and just with no agenda, and your brain is like solving problems along the way. Like that's the thing like that we have to lean into a little bit more as a culture with these phones in our pockets and shit. Like, don't just be in consumption mode, but like hit some meditative, like that's why we get those ideas in the shower, man, is because we're just kind of like not thinking about stuff. So it's like absorbing, walk, digest, absorb, walk, digest for 28 days straight.
Yeah, it made me think of something on the way over here. I was going to ask you, are you a person that dreams?
Yeah.
Did you feel that in your dreams? Were they very different whenever you were away?
They were, and they are, and it's very creative because, and I can only imagine it's because of the weird visual stimuli that I'm getting from just even neon signs and junk like that.
Well, they say the dreaming is sort of a processing, of what you've taken in that day, is sort of like filing it around, making it make sense in your brain in some way. So taking on all that, seeing all of this different stimuli would have an effect if you're conscious of your dreams. I would assume it would have, an effect of like, wow, this is different territory.
Yeah, like just that's aesthetically, but even like spiritually, there were a lot of takeaways. And I'm not a religious dude, and I'm not a hippie, but I got to hang out for 30 days, a month, in a place where everybody is thoughtful to one another and is not trying to be in anyone else's way. And I've seen tremendous acts of kindness every day. When I was in Shibuya on Halloween with more humanity than I've ever seen in my entire life, there was no drama. There wasn't a fight. The only loud people were like drunken British people and fucking New Zealand people.
It's a shame. Like the loud people you could understand. You're like, oh, they're speaking my language.
Right. Like, I've seen nothing but generosity on the train. If there's an old man getting on and it's packed, people make efforts to make sure that that old timer is sitting his ass on a chair before this thing goes off. I was chased down for dropping my one train card and didn't notice it, and somebody went off, might have missed their train to give me my card back. You know what I mean? These are lessons that I plan to take away, like a pilgrimage. Like when you come back, it's you're supposed to bring, like, the people around you, they don't know what you just experienced, so it's like you have to be an example. And like bring this new kind of like information. So I'm saying you could just lead by example. So that is something that I've taken away, of just like trying to be just a more conscientious, gracious person.
That struck me whenever I visited, was like, there's a lot of energy and resources devoted to peacefulness.
Yeah.
A lot of temples, like whenever I was there, I saw a lot of temples where it really is just about, I guess, reflection and meditation and, kind of a calm centering what you're describing. And I think it even extends to like their advertising stuff. There were so many of those like cartoon characters and like mascots and things where it felt like it was akin, it was sort of like these peaceful, pleasant, cartoonish icons would be like at every train stop. You would see those on all the advertising signage and everything. And it really stood out to me of like, oh, that's pretty interesting. I see like Red Dead Redemption or something with a shotgun pointing at us on a billboard here. And it was like, it's a very different message. It's kind of a very different thing to surround yourself with. Like I said, like resources or energy. I don't know the best way to describe it. I don't even know if it's cultural, but it just seems like there's a certain amount of stuff devoted to this peacefulness, reflection, introspection. I don't know what that is, but I appreciated that a lot. Like that's something I wouldn't mind having more of in my life.
Yeah.
And maybe it's just a matter of having that reminder in my life to be like, shut off the phone for 10 minutes tonight or something.
And just like, I think, I forget if it was Freakonomics or if it was Outliers, the one that described that the reason why New York took its upswing and less crime and all that was the broken windows theory. If there's shit on the streets and if there's busted windows, what's another busted window? Let me toss this rock, or I'll just throw my Snickers bar on the wrapper on the ground.
Yeah. So
I think we operate with broken windows kind of theory in terms of our attitudes. So it's just like, you gotta maybe especially as cartoonists, I feel like it should be easier for us because we're on the fringes anyhow. We're fighting against our nature to just sit by ourselves making comics. So
Maybe I need less reflection time.
so we're like, I'm used to not fitting in. So why not just be nice and gracious and not have any defensive edge where you're just expecting somebody to mistake it for weakness, because I think that that's what we do, and I think that's why we're always tough
Yeah, it could be.
and stoic and try not to like reveal our cards and shit because we just assume that we're going to be taken advantage of. You don't have to put yourself, you could be a nice person and not put yourself in a position to be taken advantage of. If you detect that somebody is that way, you just don't fuck with them anymore, you know? But you don't have to like even have an argument.
Yeah, words to live by for sure.
Yeah.
One other thing that may be related to this, there's an illustrator I follow on Instagram, Rebecca Green. She does a lot of like picture books. That's kind of how I found her work. And I just saw a post before I came over here today. I think her Instagram's Rebecca Green Illustration. But she was talking about Tuesdays she is devoting to just play, she calls it. So there were a bunch of drawings of her, like, you know, they weren't for an assignment, they weren't for a job or a book or something she's working on. And I think it's the same kind of idea. It's that piece of like, give yourself a little bit of time for, you know, it's making time really for this stuff to like let that come out.
Yeah.
You know, let your pencil kind of flow freely and see what's really kicking around in your head. I think, man, for making art, like, all of these lessons are things I could apply that I think would enhance my life.
Before I became pro, I was working at a call center, and that was after Kubert school. For about a year and a half, I did almost zero drawing. Working at that place for 8 hours a day had an emotional toll on me because the calls that we got were only screaming.
Right, yeah.
And I knew that this person was not screaming at me. It was the issues that they had to deal with. But your physiology doesn't know that.
Yeah, on one level they're screaming at you. There's a physical...
Yeah, there's body chemistry that's happening and shit like that. Defense mechanisms, whatever. So emotionally it was cool, but like there was something, and it left me exhausted every day. So after I was like engaged in retail therapy, all that kind of thing, or just like, you know, buying video games or more comics or whatever. When I decided to make that plunge and say, I'm out of here, like I can't be in this environment, I can't listen to somebody that I don't respect as a boss, you know. I started making some strips. I drew better than I did when I put the pencil down. I don't understand how that's possible. But something about like taking that time down, maybe seeing, maybe observing a little bit of the world and internalizing things that way, helped add to the process. But I drew better comic, like just in general, than I did a year and a half before when I put the pencil down. And you know, it wasn't like a ceremonial thing. It was just like I got caught up in some shit. I blinked, and it was a year and a half later. And I was like, I can't do this for 30 years, you know?
It happens with a lot of people. You know, like I interact with students a lot and talk to other, you know, we talk to other artists. Like this is something I've heard people talk about. I think it's just a recalibration. Like we all kind of learn to draw as kids and you go through art schools, you know, whether it's classes in high school or going to trade school or going to college or whatever. And you're sort of working for assignment. You're working to try to fulfill expectations that you may be imagining, you know, but it's very different than like when you're on your own, it's a totally different mindset. And sometimes it takes that shift of like, I'm not drawing anything for a while, or I don't have an assignment in front of me, you know, what do I do? And, you know, it's very easy to have some time pass. And when you come back because you want it, you know, it's like you miss that feeling that you can lose. When I was doing ballpoint pen drawings, I had that. It was almost like when we started looking at Wizards, where it was like, oh yeah, I remember drawing for fun, you know, drawing for nothing except to amuse myself, to waste time or something. So, yeah, I think all that makes sense.
Yeah,
you know, I don't think you're alone in any of that. Like it's I can relate to that, and I'm sure other people that have made art, people, you know, that have been following the channel that we hear from that are like, man, I didn't draw for all this time, and now I'm back to drawing.
I know, and they make me mad too, because when they send us the comic and it's so so fucking good, I'm just like.
I have theories on like you'll see athletes that'll have to sit down for a little bit for one reason or another, and I think often that helps them. It might just let them allow them to maybe appreciate what they're doing. You know, I'm sure you get just very cynical if you're a professional athlete. And sometimes whenever you see those guys have to be forced to take some distance for a suspension or an injury or something, it seems like it can change their perspective. You know, sometimes they come back and it's like, yeah, I may not get to play for very long. You know, I'm getting older or whatever. Let me enjoy this.
Yeah.
You know, you almost see that demeanor shift, and sometimes it's just that break that I think allows the perspective to be like, all right, I'm seeing it different.
To circle around from what we were talking about earlier, and when we first brought up the Japan thing, I did not turn in my train card because you could get a refund. It's like a deposit you get, so you can get your money back. And I did not convert over $300, man, back into USD. It's just sitting there as yen because I'm going to go back. I'm going to make it an annual thing. And and not crazy to think that maybe it's an every 6 month thing. The reason it will not be in 2020 is because of the Olympics. I'm not going there when the Olympics are happening. That sounds ridiculous.
Yeah.
Because what I saw in Halloween, it'll probably be that every day.
Yeah.
You know, it's already a crazy amount of people. And you know, the system they have worked, like they have it all figured out. That's the cool thing. It's like there's so many people here, but they all, like, nobody gets in each other's way. They all have their mission and have ways to make things happen faster. But you know, maybe around the same time next year, I'll be out there again, man. At least 2 weeks, and gonna keep that shit rolling, dude.
Well, that sounds like a good plan to me, Ed. Hopefully I'll join you on one of these trips because I would definitely like to go back.
It would be great to get some kayfabe work done, man. Like out there as a tandem, because it was kinetic. It was I was frazzled. I was going all over, and it's like, well, I can make videos about so much, and I think we're going to make videos about a lot of stuff. The first major piece of business we're going to do,
Oh yeah, tease them.
yeah, is far on, what is that? Like, to you guys, it's your far right. You see those two red books laying prone in the middle
two?
there? Those two, man. That's Kaze Shinobu, and he is a fucking brilliant. He is a brilliant. Well, definitely this one.
Yeah, this is amazing.
And the other, this guy right there. It is like,
This one I might try to steal.
yeah,
I'm waiting for that jet lag to kick in and
Right.
Ed to fall asleep again, and I'm gonna walk away with this one, I think.
yeah. Just think of it's Japanese fucking outlaw comics.
Yes.
And some of that stuff was printed. I have an issue of Heavy Metal that has some of that artwork in that smaller edition. But wait till you guys see that stuff under the microscope. If you're not quite familiar, it's a real mind warper.
It's going to be incredible going through this stuff. I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to year 2, man. I've already got stuff planned for the foreseeable future. I have my stack of things that I want us to cover and get into. So
It's our anniversary, man. We did it for
This is just the
365. We did it for 365. Before we split, I tried to make note of all of the super chatters. I may have missed one or two. Many apologies, but let me just call out these names real quick. DJ Convoy, Frank G, Frush 30, Daniel M, Feardouse, Ryan Dowling, Comic Tropes, Keith Perkins, Danny, Comic Book Journeys, Jay McQuerns, the guy who did our animated intro sequence for all of our videos, is Jay McQuerns, man, super cool dude. Greg G, Live and Let Lift, DS Barrick, Adam Brooks, Jonathan Fox, Jason, Manny Gomez, man, thanks for the super chats. Thanks for supporting the channel in that way. There are a lot of ways that one can support the channel, and it doesn't necessarily require any kind of monetary thing, man. You could spread that word about the channel, because I'm going to be upset if the computer and the internet allows for exponential growth. So getting 20,000 by next time we reconvene, November 5th, 2020, that doesn't work for me, Jimmy.
no, Thursday. We want it by Thursday.
Yeah.
I'm with you, Ed. Thank you to everybody that's joined us this year. This is just the beginning, as Ed said. I was thinking about stores. You mentioned Elite Comics starting in 93, 94. I see a lot of comic stores, and I'll see them, and they'll be like 8 years old, 9 years old, and I'll think, oh, it's new. Man, a year? I feel like this has been going on for much more than a year, and we are just getting started. So hopefully that'll be us in 30 years from now. We'll be looking back, and this will be a distant memory. So thank you all that are here now. Just keep telling friends, man. Keep sharing it, and you know, stick around. Make this community grow and get better and bigger and stronger. And there's no shortage of comics to talk about, to cover, to show off, to make. So this is just the beginning.
Yeah, and eventually I will get Jim to slip up, man, and get him to talk about that shit he's working on right now.
Hey, man, I've been thinking about keeping a video journal about it, so that once I'm allowed to let it out, because it's a big project, you know,
Yeah.
it's a lot of work, and I like sharing it with everybody, and I'm kind of missing not talking about it, so I have been thinking about keeping a kind of a log along the way.
And with that in mind, your homeboy Eddie P is back in town, man. So expect those sporadic and spontaneous nighttime streams to start up again. Once we break all this down and go our separate ways for the evening, I'm writing my next page.
Yes.
And then I'm going to have to draw that shit.
We say like, follow, and subscribe, and please do all that. Make sure you hit the bell icon for exactly this. Whenever these live streams pop up, that's what that bell icon will notify you, so you don't miss any of those. And that's kind of the little surprises that just happen on the fly.
Yeah.
So hit the bell icon to know when they are happening.
Another thing I got to do, man, because I have enough pages for like an episode. Hopefully before we bounce to Kansas City. Definitely by the time we go to North Carolina, I'm gonna have the first episode of like the comics reading of issue 1 of my next thing. Be able to give some scoop on the title. The title says it all. Especially if you're not familiar and you do a Google search, you'll know what it's about, essentially. But I just went to school, you know. Now I have to like absorb my materials, man, and I got to do my thesis.
You went to the school bookshop.
Yeah.
Now it's time to hit them.
Yeah. A lot of these are still in their shrink wrap, man, because they did not feel like they were mine until I brought them back to the house. I just assumed my bags would never come home. And they did, in tatters.
Books will beat up an average suitcase.
Yes.
Books will win that fight.
I have no idea where all that like peanut brittle like plastic came from that one suitcase, but it sure did.
Yeah, I've destroyed a suitcase or two shipping books around. Life of a cartoonist, man.
That's it, man. So Jimmy and I got to get back to business. Anybody who bought some of our shirts in our spread shop, we appreciate that stuff. Jimmy?
Yeah, it's been fun making those things, and we only make them because you guys have been buying them, so keep that up. Link below the video to that spread shop link.
Yep. Should we get the fuck out of here, man?
Yes, that's it for this, but
who knows how long we've been going.
Yeah, for sure.
To another year?
To another year, and you guys know what to do.
Read more comics. And then this is where we would hit the button to stop streaming. Yes. But we'll just have to get up and do that.
Messes it up.
Yeah.
So.
All right.
Thanks again, everybody.